Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our virtual program, 2024 St. Louis County Library Staff Favorites. We're so glad that you can join us for this, really fun end of the year wrap up of books. Yeah, welcome. So before we get started, I just want to go through a little bit of kind of Zoom basics. So just so you know, tonight's program is in a webinar format. So that means your camera and microphone are not active, so no one can see or hear you, but you should be able to see and hear us. So if you are having trouble hearing us, we suggest that you turn up the volume on your device or that you leave the webinar and move a bit closer to your Wi-Fi router and then rejoin. We are recording tonight's program though, so we will be posting it to YouTube, and once that link is ready to go, we'll send you the link so you can always watch it there. I did send out a handout with, but also we do have the chat. So even though we can't hear you, you can post comments or questions in the chat. We will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation as time allows. So I did send out a handout this afternoon that has all of our picks on it. If you didn't get that handout, no worries. Like I said, we're recording, and when I send out the follow-up email, I'll have the handout attached to that as well. But these are tonight's presenters. So I'm Sarah. I'm an adult services librarian here at St. Louis County Library. I work in Readers Advisory, which is like matchmaking books and readers. We're joined tonight by Harry, who also works in adult services Readers Advisory. Sarah L. from Bookmobiles, Catherine from the Clark Family Branch, Kelsey from the Cliff Cave Branch, Maisie from Grand Glaze, Jess from Merrimack Valley. Kat from Mid-County is unfortunately not feeling well tonight, so she won't be able to join us, but I'll be reading a bit of information about her picks. We're also joined by Trista from Prairie Commons, Lindsay from Rock Road, Miriam from Saks, and Robin from our training department. This is one of my favorite programs of the year. I love presenting with so many of my colleagues and hearing about their favorite picks and hearing what you all think of their picks. So I want to thank all of them for taking time out of their regular duties to present with us tonight. It's so fun having so many of us together. All of the tonight's picks are things that we carry at the library, and you can get them either in print or e-media through our catalog or through our two e-media platforms, Hoopla or Overdrive, which is the Libby app. So the handout that I'm going to send you, or that I have sent you, if you open it up in the PDF format and you click on the covers, it'll take you to our library catalog to check it out. So we hope that you will check out some of the books that we talk about tonight. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to be the first one tonight. So my first pick of 2024 is The Ministry of Time by Callie-Ann Bradley. And I want to give a shout out to our audiovisual selector, Cindy, who orders all of the movies and audiobooks and music for the library. She picked this as one of the upcoming titles that she was looking forward to at our Lit Lovers Festival in April. And that's how I first found out about it. So I'm so glad that she did pick it. This is a time travel love story spy thriller with like the heart of a literary novel. The unnamed narrator is a British government employee who gets a secret assignment as a bridge for a time traveler expat. The narrator is told that the government has discovered time travel and has brought forward a number of people from the past just before their historical deaths so that they wouldn't be missed from the timeline. And that basically this project is a test to see how people are like physically and emotionally affected by time travel. And so her job is to help a particular subject, Lieutenant Graham Gore, acclimate to the present day. Gore, who by the way is a real historical figure, is very charming. And the narrator, of course, starts to fall for him. And this complicates her job, as you can imagine, especially when it seems that the story that she's been told about what this project is all about doesn't really seem to add up. I really love a good time travel novel, but what really sets this one apart is the research into the historical Lieutenant Gore in order to bring that character to life, as well as the lovely literary writing. As an example, Bradley writes of Gore, quote, "Despite being out of uniform, he looked oddly formal, as if he was the sole person in serif font," end quote. Such a great turn of phrase. So Bradley is able to explore big themes such as hope and forgiveness, regret, colonialism, feminism, and moral ambiguity, wrapped up in a fun and engaging novel crafted with such lovely language. So I highly recommend this one. Okay, my next pick of 2024 is The Eyes and the Impossible by Dave Eggers. This is a children's book, and in fact, it won the Newbery Medal this year. But it's the type of children's book that has really deep truths for people of all ages. And the book is narrated by Johannes, who is a free dog that lives in this large urban park that is very reminiscent of Golden Gate Park. His role as, quote, the eyes, is to watch everything that goes on in the park and then to report back to these three wise bison who live in an enclosure there. Um, and their advice helps keep the, quote, equilibrium at the park. Johannes is helped in this task by several other animal characters who act as assistant eyes. The equilibrium, however, is forever changed when a new building in the sort of shows up in the park that features beautiful rectangles, a kidnapping and escape happens, and there is an arrival of a herd of very strange animals with new ideas. All of this leads Johannes to decide that the bison need to be set free. But what does it mean to be free? Can you impose your idea of freedom onto others, even with the best of intentions? Or is freedom really about knowing who you are and what you need to make the best choices for yourself, as well as supporting others and making their own choices? This book is wonderful in both print and audio. The print book has beautiful painterly illustrations throughout, kind of like the cover here, and the audio is narrated by actor Ethan Hawke. So, and like Ministry of Time, the writing is really evocative and expressive of the perspective of the animals in like a heartfelt and immersive way. If you're an adult who still loves Winnie the Pooh or The Little Prince or The Wind in the Willows, then I would encourage you to check out The Eyes and the Impossible. All right, so next up we have Harry, so I will turn it over to Harry.
My video. Okay, I was waiting for my video. So these picks are our Christmas presents to you. And so thinking of that, I styled both of my books as presents. My first present would be a small gift bag with the name of a jeweler emblazoned in gold on it. Inside, you would reach in and find a velvet-lined jewelry box. Opening the box, you would find a large diamond ring with a certificate of authenticity. The problem is, the ring may be fake. Why do I say that? Well, from personal experience. Uh, in the early 80s, I bought an engagement ring. And then 10 years later, when unfortunately my marriage was breaking up, it came out that the jeweler was selling diamonds that had been altered. They had been chemically filled. You couldn't see it, but they were chemically filled and being sold at a lower price, but still looking impressive. Fortunately, my diamond was not like that. It was probably too small to fake. But that takes me to this book. You like a twisty book like a Frida McFadden or a Lisa Jewell book? This is for you. You want a glamorous thriller set among the rich in Hong Kong? Martina is a freelance reporter married to blue-blooded Spencer. Poor Martina's bored. She interviews shipping heiress Veronica. Well, what happens to Veronica and Martina? You'll have to read the book. Both women have secrets. This book is for fans of Big Little Lies and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. My second book is The Mighty Red by Louise Erdrich. This book, I liked it so much that after I read it, I then listened to it on audio. For your present, this would be a big red paper wrapped present with candy canes on top, and you shake it, and there are lots of heavy pieces rattling inside. That's how I would think of this book. Because this book, set in North Dakota, in sugar beet country, and also near fracking area, you have drama surrounding an impending wedding of Gary, the star high school quarterback, who also is a desperate young man who is going to inherit several farms, so he's going to become wealthy. he wants to marry Kismet, who is the goth, rebel fellow student in his class. And poor Kismet just wants to go to college and escape where she's living. But what about Hugo? Hugo is a nerdy homeschooler who also loves Kismet. So we have a love triangle. What is Kismet's mother, who drives a sugar beet truck, going to do? The themes of this book are mother-daughter relations, coming of age, the impact of humans on the environment, and the life and afterlife. Also, I'll add as a final point, there is a book discussion group in the book which is absolutely hysterical when they discuss two of Cormac McCarthy's books. So, highly recommend both these books depending on your taste. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah L.
All right. Hello, everybody. As they mentioned at the beginning, I'm from the bookmobile department, and if you have not heard, we just got two new bookmobiles we're all very excited about. So I had to plug that really quick. Um, but anyway, so my picks are both fantasy. I'm a big fantasy reader, and particularly, and again, both cozy fantasy, which is just fantasy, but the stakes are smaller. The world's not going to end. There's still drama, there's still excitement, but it's not quite as intense, and it's more approachable than, say, like your Lord of the Rings, like epic fantasies. I love those too, but I have a soft spot for cozy fantasies. So The Phoenix Keeper is, I think, the best book I've read in a long time. It fits two things. It's a cozy fantasy, which is my favorite genre, but it also is about this magical zookeeper. I love animals, and it's just so fun. It's this magical zookeeper who's trying to grow a breeding program for these endangered phoenixes. And a lot of things ensue. She learns a lot, grows a lot. Um, I also love that this book has a lot of queer representation. There's a trans character, there's other queer characters. So if you like queer characters in your books, it's a great fit for you. If you like animals, it's a great story. Animals are a huge part of this story. They're the main focus, really. Even the main character, her focus is the phoenixes. And it is just so much fun. It's a warm little hug of a book. I read it so fast. I loved it. I highly recommend it. Um, it and if you like cozy books, so if you like cozy mysteries, this is a good way to dip into fantasy. If you want just something that feels like a warm hug, like it's just lighthearted and it's sweet, and yes, there's some stress and there's some drama, but in the end, it's just a great, sweet story. Highly recommend. And then my next book is Lore of the Wilds. Lore of the Wilds is a really great story. It spoke to me personally because she goes on to work in this fantastical magical library. Lore is a human, and she lives in a human town settlement that is surrounded by the Fae. And at some point in the past, this human settlement just ended up in the Fae world. They didn't start here, they just kind of ended up here, and they're trapped in their town and they're looked down on by the Fae. But the Fae need Lore to find this book that she ends up finding and not telling them about the whole adventure. It's great. This is a duology. The second book will be coming out in, I believe it's July of 2025. And there's a lot of really fun and just exciting adventures. You get to follow Lore as she learns magic and she makes friends with the Fae, and the Fae learn that maybe we shouldn't hate humans. And it's a really fun book that I really also enjoyed thoroughly. Um, and it's got a soft spot in my heart because as a librarian, I love anything that features librarians and libraries. So it's great. I'm very excited for book two. I cannot wait for it to release. I've been waiting for a while. I will keep waiting, but if you like fantasy, it's a good pick. It's really fun. It reads fast, and there's a lot of really, really good, interesting characters beyond just Lore. Right. And then I will pass it off to Catherine.
Hello, thank you. My name is Catherine. I'm from the Clark family branch. If you haven't had a chance to visit the new branch yet, you should stop by and see it. It's a pretty cool branch. I'm not just saying that because I'm biased. My first pick of the year is The Watchers by A.M. Shine. I read this book. I know that it is a movie now. I did read the book before the movie came out, and I'll give you my thoughts on the movie at the end. A forest that shouldn't exist, and in which technology and vehicles stop working, where otherworldly screams pierce the air as soon as the sun sets. Mina, the main character, her car stops working immediately upon entering the forest and is immediately surrounded by the imposing trees. As the sun begins to set, she follows a woman yelling for her to hurry and to get in a concrete bunker with a glass wall. She makes it inside just as the sun sets and the screaming and the shaking begins. A single light activates inside the bunker, illuminating her new captivity. Mina and 3 other strangers must follow the basic rules to survive. Do not leave the bunker except during the day. Do not try to hide from the watchers, and always stay in the light. The watchers emerge from the ground at night to observe their captives, and they will not be deceived. Mina and her fellow captives must figure out what the watchers want and why they are there in order to figure out a way out of the endless forest. I'm not usually a fan of like the horror genre. That's not really my thing a lot of times. But this was a really unique, fresh twist on like Irish mythology, which I haven't really read a lot about. And I thought was really interesting and a unique take on it. And it kept me wanting to see what would happen next. If you've seen the movie, if you enjoyed the movie adaptation, I would highly recommend reading this book as well. Or even if you hate the movie, that's fine too. Or if you have no interest in seeing the movie, I would recommend reading this too because it dives a lot deeper into mythology and into like the Irish mythology and lore, and it captivated me the entire time. It is the first in a planned trilogy, so the sequel is out, and the third one should be coming out, I think, in a couple of months. So I highly recommend. And my second pick is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. I remember before I read this book, I read a review describing the book as a combination of Pride and Prejudice and Howl's Moving Castle. And as a huge fan of both of those books and all of the possible movie adaptations or TV adaptations of it, I knew I had to pick this book up and give it a try. I'm so glad I did. Stories about Theodora Eddings, or Dora for short, is a young woman of marriageable age in Regency, England. Her aunt has given up trying to marry her off because of her unusual predicament. Dora cannot feel fear or embarrassment. Because of a deal her mother made with a fairy when she was young, Dora was originally going to be spirited back to another realm, but the process was cut short and only half a soul was taken. Because of this, Dora does not respond the way that is expected in social circles and often does not act the way that she should, which there's a lot of funny moments where she says things that would not be societal standards back in the day. Everything changes when she happens to meet the Lord Sorcerer of society, who is very brusque and proud, think like Mr. Darcy, who takes an interest in her because of her perceived curse and her lack of swooning. Thus begins their journey into figuring out a way to reverse what was taken and find out if someone with half a soul can indeed feel love. This was a precious, light-hearted read that was beautifully written and just made me feel warm inside. Highly recommend. And our next pick is from Kelsey.
Hi, I'm from the Cliff Cave branch. I'm Kelsey. My first book is The Dead Take the A Train. I was actually recommended this book by a coworker, and I absolutely loved it. So if you grew up watching and loving like Buffy or Angel, then this is the perfect book for you. The main character is a witch for hire named Julie that is a little bit of a train wreck. She just does not have her life together, and nothing ever seems to go her way. She summons a guardian angel to protect herself and her new love interest, but like everything in her life, it does not go to plan. There's so much that goes on in this book. There's an evil law firm, problematic exes, a love story, a ton of bizarre deaths. I will say this book is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of gore, a lot of body horror, but mixed in with all that gore is a lot of humor and a very sweet story about found family. So this book actually has two authors, Cassandra Caw and Richard Kadri. Um, and they do a wonderful job mixing their individual styles of writing. Cassandra is known for more like sci-fi and horror, and Richard is known more for like fantasy horror. So it was really fun to see a mix of the two. And you do sometimes definitely feel like there's two voices, but it works really well. Um, the authors have stated that there will be a sequel and that it's in the works. I cannot wait for that. I love this book and the humor and the characters. The side characters are amazing. Saint Joan is one I cannot wait to see more of her backstory. We got a little bit of it in this one, and I hope there's a little bit more focus on her in the next one because she is amazing. But alongside Julie's main story, there's also so much other side stories that we get to see building that allow us to see this fantasy version of New York. It's a roller coaster of a story, but it is so good and worth the ride. I will also say the audiobook is really well narrated. So it was a lot, but amazing. So, and my next pick is My Government Means to Kill Me, which is also set in New York. So this one I actually picked out randomly for my LGBT book club that I run at Cliff Cave, and it became one of my favorite books of 2024. So it follows Trey, who is a New York City transplant from Indiana in the 1980s. It follows him as he navigates the city as a young gay Black man. And he meets so many people along the way, including Angie, who is a lesbian carrying for AIDS patients in her own home. And so you see that struggle of what was going on at the time and how a lot of people were just shunned by their families and the medical system. Um, there is also a fictionalized version of civil rights leader Bayard Rustin, who is my favorite character, but I'll talk more about him later. So Trey kind of just goes through so many key moments in New York history and queer history, including the ACT UP movement. So it's kind of like a LGBT version of Forrest Gump, which I really loved. But alongside what's going on with him now, we also get glimpses of his past and the disappearance of his younger brother, which may be part of the reason why he left Indiana. So this is Rashid Newson, who's the author. This is his first book, and I hope he writes more. But he does a great job bringing this part of history to life. And he adds a lot of footnotes, which are really helpful if you're not as familiar with this part of history. I have read a lot about the ACT UP movement in New York in the 80s, and I was still learning so much reading this book. So um, his version of Bayard Rustin is my favorite character in the book. He gives so much wisdom and knowledge to Trey along the way, but he also is very caring, but he doesn't fall into like tropes. He is still very realistic and human, which I think is sometimes really hard to do. And if Sarah had said that there were a real life character in the book she recommended, I feel like that's really hard to bring a real person to life and to do it well. So it tackles a lot of big subjects, but there's still a lot of humor, and I am so happy I found this at random. So I will I will turn it over to Maisie.
Hello, hello. I'm Maisie. I'm at Grand Glaze. And my first pick is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. And I love reading T. Kingfisher because often she picks old fairy tales to play off of, and she twists them into something new and fresh. And this book is no exception to that. It's based on the story of the Goose Girl, and if you haven't read the story of the Goose Girl, you should give it a little read. It's short and sweet, very cute, classic fairy tale. And The Sorceress Comes to Call is not cute. It will have you hating one of the main characters at the end, which I think is a great sign of a book if it evokes that emotion. In The Sorceress Comes to Call, you meet Cordelia and her mother, the sorceress Evangeline. The opening scene shows Cordelia being what is quoted as obedient. And her obedience is a spell her mother puts on her that makes her like a marionette doll. Her mother controls her every move. She can't swat a fly. She can't itch her face without her mother letting her do it. And that kind of describes what Evangeline is like as a sorceress. And the real story with them begins when Evangeline decides that she needs to find a husband because they're running out of money and she needs to fund her fancy lady lifestyle. So, as you continue following this pair, you will be biting your nails, especially if you listen to the audiobook because it is very well narrated. And you'll watch Evangeline drag Cordelia along with her through this nightmare. And while you are watching, you will see Cordelia start to peel away some of the lies that her mother has told her and see some of the reality as she is taken from her sheltered life and meets new people who are like, hey, your mom's a little crazy. What's going on there? And Cordelia realizes she's the only one who can save this poor man that Evangeline has set her witchy eyes on. So the way T. Kingfisher writes will firmly plant you in this world of fantasy, and it will make you want to keep reading past your bedtime because I certainly did. And my next pick is called The Tree Collectors, Tales of Arboreal Obsession. And I tend to stick strictly in my fantasy horror sci-fi realm for reading, but this year I set a goal to read more nonfiction. So I branched out, haha, get it? And picked this book not only because I'm a plant person, but because it was nonfiction. I thought it would be a short, easy read. This book is a collection of 50 memoirs where people from all across the world talk about why they're passionate about trees. And, as a plant person, self-identified, I was attracted not only because of plants, but because I like memoirs. I like learning about people, and I wanted to see, what could possibly span the entire world like nature and like trees. So my favorite feature in it is a memoir of an artist named Alpana. And Alpana is an artist who creates installations based on the concept that nothing exists in nature on its own. Everything is woven together, everything is interconnected. And she found herself taking a little walk one day and noticing that as she was pondering and thinking about her next line of work. And while she was doing that walk, she was picking up leaves from the ground. And when she got back home, she was gonna start to play with the colors, and she noticed that some of them had holes in them. So she decided that she wanted to insert herself into that interconnectedness and repair those leaves. So she sewed them back together with silk thread, and it became the beginning of an arts installation for her and her love of trees. And, these stories, of course, are about a love of trees and a love of nature. But while you're reading them, you will also find grief, family ties, passion, faith, fear, change, and deep, unbridled joy. And some of that joy comes from watching something grow and knowing that it might outlive you by hundreds of years and that maybe you're creating something for future generations. The author also took time to do little watercolor portraits of all of the people who she interviewed. and they're beautiful. She also has little inserts in the book that kind of give you a break from some of the interviews. And my favorite one was a little watercolor instructional on how to press leaves so you can start your own collection of art. And it's my recommendation for this year. It surprised me in a very sweet way. The next presenter is Jess. Take it away, Jess.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Maisie. I'm Jess, and I'm a library associate from the Merrimack Valley branch. The first book that I'm going to talk about tonight that I read and loved this year is Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. Poverty by America is a book about the ways that our financial, legal, and housing systems are set up to benefit people who are already wealthy. The United States has more people living in poverty than any other advanced democracy, including 1 out of every 8 children. The costs of being poor, from accessing medical care, substandard housing, and predatory financial institutions, create a vicious cycle of poverty that can be impossible to break. The things that I learned from this book were often infuriating, but I also appreciated that the author gives concrete examples of legislation and other actions that could be taken to promote financial equity in our society. This book is concise and it's a relatively quick read, but it's also incredibly thoroughly researched, and his conclusions and suggestions are well supported and data-driven. This made it a great read because it doesn't feel too dense, but because it's so thoroughly researched and cited, it can easily serve as a kind of a jumping off point for further research on the topics that he covers. I also loved Matthew Desmond's previous book, Evicted, which followed people in Milwaukee who are either facing eviction or have been evicted. While Evicted focused on individual situations, and I feel like Matthew Desmond really tried to remain objective in his reporting in that one, I appreciated that Poverty by America zooms out to focus on the big picture of how our society perpetuates the cycle of poverty. And he's also clear about the injustice of allowing such a system to remain in place. I think everyone should read this book, but I think it will have particular appeal for people who like well-written nonfiction that covers big topics in an accessible way. Another book that I read and loved this year was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow follows Sam and Sadie, who have had a close but tumultuous friendship since childhood and build a successful career together as video game designers. It follows them from when they meet in the hospital where Sadie's sister is receiving treatment and Sam is recovering from a catastrophic accident, through their adolescent falling out and college reunion, and into adulthood and the business that they build together. The characters in this book are all complex, and they each have their own emotional journeys and past traumas, and each of these characters makes frustrating decisions at times. I thought that this novel did an excellent job of capturing some of the nuance of maintaining a long-term friendship, the ways that we can hurt each other unknowingly, and the unsaid resentments that can build. I'm not a gamer myself, and I put off reading this book for a while despite hearing great things about it because I wasn't sure that I would enjoy a book about video games, but I ended up really loving reading about the creative process involved in video game creation and visiting the worlds that Sam and Sadie create together. I read this book with my book club, and although only a couple of the people who attended the discussion play video games, we had a great discussion about the characters, creative expression, and friendship. I think this book would appeal to anyone who likes novels about complicated people and complicated friendships that are tested by time and circumstance. It would appeal to fans of authors such as Britt Bennett, Taylor Jenkins Reid, and Donna Tartt. Thanks for listening and happy reading. I'll pass it on now to Kat.
Okay. So, yeah, like I said, unfortunately, Kat wasn't feeling well and isn't able to join us tonight, but I'm going to read some professional reviews of her 2 books, to give you kind of a taste of what what they're about. So, her first pick is Witch King by Martha Wells. Wells is very popular for her really funny sci-fi series, Murderbot series, but this is fantasy. And the review from Booklist says, quote, "In this new high fantasy, Wells creates a vast fantasy world in which demons and expositors battle. When Witch King and legendary demon Kai wakes in an underwater prison, his immediate reaction is rage. With his partner Ziti and new friend Sanja, he sets out into the world to find out who imprisoned them and why, and what it means for the politics of their world. Meanwhile, in alternate chapters, we start at the beginning, how Kai first became a central figure in the war between demons, witches, and the mysterious hierarchs. As always, Wells writes exciting action scenes that pepper this expansive, vivid plot. The characters are bright and exciting, rooted by Kai, this villainous, pain-powered demon with a soft, loyal center, and the relationships that push and pull between these characters. High fantasy fans will want to dig into this new inventive world from one of our SF and fantasy masters. And just as a note, in case you end up loving this book like Kat does, there is a sequel that's going to be titled Demon or Queen Demon, and it's coming out in October of 2025. All right, and then Kat's next pick is Mammoths at the Gate by Naivo. And Library Journal actually gave this book a starred review, and they state, quote, "The steps of wandering cleric Chi have turned towards home. They expect to find the monastery much as they left it, but they return to mammoths blocking the gate and their oldest friend in mid-argument with the commander of the force. She learns that their mentor is dead, the clerics and apprentices have rushed to the site of a new discovery, and the home they expected to be a haven is nearly a battleground. Expecting peace, instead, she finds chaos and change. But amidst the depths of mourning and regret, there might just be a space where the nearly warring forces can meet in an uneasy middle. She finds themselves an outsider in the place they call home and grieves for not just the loss of their mentor, but also the changes in themselves and their once closest companion. But grief proves to be bittersweet as their late mentor's experience continues through one profoundly grieving bird. Verdict. This fourth entry in the Singing Hills Cycle series, after Into the Riverlands, is every bit as beautiful and thought-provoking as its predecessors. Highly recommended for fans of the previous books in the series and for anyone who loves their fantasy colored with myth, legend, and bittersweet truth, end quote. And I will say, I actually read the first book in this series and really did love it. They're all short novellas, but they're just lyrical and pack a punch and have lots of lovely mythology in them. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Trista.
Thanks, Sarah. And I have also read that series from Nevo and definitely endorse, support that as a pick for this year. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite books that I read this year, a collection of short stories written by Mariana Enriquez, titled A Sunny Place for Shady People, which was published in September. If I had to characterize this book, it's definitely literary horror, but there are sympathetic characters and dark humor, which should keep the stories compelling even for fiction readers who aren't typically drawn to the horror genre. Still, if you're squeamish about descriptions of bodies in various states of decay, disfigurement, metamorphosis, or disappearance, this book might not be for you. But for those willing to endure some morbid chills and unease, I highly recommend it. In A Sunny Place for Shady People, Enriquez takes ordinary, mundane, material reality and twists it into something grotesque. She introduces surreal and supernatural elements to her stories, suggesting that some horrors can only be properly relayed by entering the realm of myth or ghost stories. As Enriquez writes stories set in her homeland of Argentina, the country's history of military dictatorship and violence keeps seeping into the present. In a story titled Hyena Hymns, an old mansion harbors uncanny, undead horrors that speak to past torture. In different colors made of tears, vintage dresses carry a curse that keeps one man's hatred for his dead ex-wife alive. But there's resilience and care in these stories too. I rooted for the narrator of Black Eyes as she follows her instincts to survive an attack by demon children. And I was moved by the main character in My Sad Dead, who stays in a rundown, often violent neighborhood, not because she has no other options, but because she has learned how to soothe the restless spirits who haunt the area, including her own mother's ghost. These stories are absolutely riveting, and I could not put the book down. My second pick is There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension by Hanif Abdurraqib, which was published in March. Abdurraqib is one of those writers that I would follow to the ends of the earth. His NPR podcast, Small Joys with Hanif Abdurraqib, honestly got me through the worst of the pandemic. He talked on that podcast with artists and writers about what brings them joy and what fuels their creativity, and it just lifted my spirits when I needed it most. But it's that signature blend of awe, appreciation, and really deep thinking that keeps bringing me back to Hanif's work. In this book, there's always this year, he meditates on his youth, his hometown of Columbus, Ohio, the boys he played ball with, and the legends like LeBron James who made it big, and the memories of friends who didn't make it out of the neighborhood or even out of adolescence. Every book I read by Hanif Abdurraqib feels like a gift, and this one is no different. To me, the writing is just stunning. Here's just a brief example. Abdurraqib writes, quote, "I haven't found many things I love as much as I love the sound of a basketball game in a park, going down to its tense and silent closing moments with the sky just beyond sunset. Players on the court too worn down to even trash talk anymore. Nothing but breath and the echo of flimsy metal bending as a ball spins off the rim, signaling a game that mercifully won't end just yet." His descriptions paint the scene as he digs into the joy and the pain of his past in this memoir in essays. You don't have to love basketball to love this book. If you appreciate intimate, insightful, personal storytelling, this book, and I think Hanif Abdurraqib as a writer would welcome you as one of their beloveds. So those are my 2 picks for my favorite reads this year. Next, I will pass the virtual mic to Lindsay.
Sorry. Okay. So I'm Lindsay Mayfield. I work at the Rocker Road branch. My first pick is Blood in the Machine: The Origins of the Rebellion Against Big Tech by Brian Merchant. So today, a Luddite is a person who fears or shuns technology. But as Brian Merchant explains, the 19th century namesake machine breaking movement was not actually about the machines. In a struggle that resonates just as much today as it did 3 centuries ago, men with money and influence use the new technology of mechanical weaving as an excuse to exploit unskilled workers and destroy the livelihoods of trained weaving professionals. The true tale of the Luddites, Merchant argues, is a story about their ill-fated fight for human dignity and work, for regulation of industry, and for organized labor. If you have ever wondered how modern industrial capitalism came to be, pondered the ethics of replacing human skill with machine efficiency, or questioned the devastation that can occur when there is no oversight of big industry, I urge you to read this book. While you do, contemplate our own age of rapidly changing technology. Will more blood be shed in the name of progress over people? Only time will tell. All right, and next is my second pick, The Language Puzzle, Piecing Together the 6 Million Year Story of How Words Evolved by Stephen J. Mithen. So language is something we use every day without even thinking about it. Some would even argue that our capacity for language is what makes us human and distinct from other animals. In The Language Puzzle, Stephen Mithen pieces together a number of anthropological, biological, and social changes which must have occurred and built off of one another in order to make speech and the later invention of writing possible. By breaking the puzzle into chunks, Mithen is able to walk the reader through his evidence-based reasoning. He cites a wide variety of sources from different scientific disciplines, reiterating them in layman's terms and building them into narratives. If you have ever wondered how linguists differentiate and record sounds on paper based on subtle mouth movements, how human face shape has changed the way our brains operate, and the thought process shortcuts babies use to effortlessly pick up words and phrases, you'll get a crash course. If you love science and want to expand your knowledge of anything language related, this book is perhaps the best and most in-depth education you will find on the topic. It is truly a PhD in miniature. really highly recommend if you're interested in language and science behind it. All right, next up is Miriam.
Hi, Miriam. I'm at the Saks branch, and my first pick is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. I will read anything Catherine Arden writes. I've read her juvenile fiction series and her Winter's Night trilogy, and her latest is Warm Hands of Ghosts. I read it back in February, and it stayed my favorite read of the year all year. So I could not recommend this more. The protagonists of this book are a brother and sister who are both serving in World War I. The sister Laura had been a nurse, and she gets discharged back to Halifax, where she's from, after she's injured. And her brother, Freddie, is serving in the trenches. And when Freddie is declared dead and she's told that he's passed away and died in combat, but nobody's found his body, she doesn't believe it and returns to Europe to try to find him. And it turns out, and this isn't giving anything away, it happens very early in the book, he's been trapped in one of the pillbox enclosures that were structures within the trenches, and he's trapped in there with a German soldier. And the two of them, isolated from the rest of their armies, have to help each other survive. The relationship that develops between the brother and the German soldier actually really made me think of Sam and Frodo from Lord of the Rings, if that's an incentive for anybody. Just this lovely supportive relationship. Meanwhile, there's something weird going on. There's this very strange man running a hotel and tavern, who's definitely not quite human, and he's offering soldiers the gift of oblivion. He's definitely up to something, but it takes a long time to kind of figure out what's going on there. Both Laura and Freddie encounter this strange man, while also facing the horrors of war, and this normal place that has become a surrealist hellscape. In an afterword to the book, Catherine Arden talked a lot about sort of the connection between surrealism and World War I, and how she used that. So this is a really beautifully written book with wonderful characters, and really great truths to it about so many things in life, even if there are slightly supernatural happenings. So this is a book that I'd recommend to anyone, even if normally you like your fiction grounded in reality. If normally you don't want anything supernatural in your historical fiction, I would still recommend this because the characters, Freddie and Laura and the German, are all such real people. So it has a little bit of everything. There are a few fantastical elements, a very slight love story, but it's not fantasy and it's not a romance and it's not traditional historical fiction. And while some of the content is often heavy and it talks about war, this book doesn't leave you feeling down or heavy. It's just a really wonderful, beautifully written book. And then my next pick is Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh. Didn't mean to have a theme of war here, but somehow I ended up with one. This is a book that is very hard to talk about without giving things away, because part of what made this book so interesting were the twists. So this, like the other book, I picked up because I love the author's earlier work. Emily Tesh, before this one, had written 2 fantasy novellas based in folklore. This is very, very different from that. It's a sci-fi novel, and Earth has been destroyed fairly recently by an alien society coming through, and I can't give any of the whys because, again, it's so easy to spoil this book. But now the protagonist of the book here lives on a space station with what she believes to be all that's left of humanity, except for a few like traitors to the society who have left, including her sister. But you know, Kira has been raised to be a warrior. She's been bred to be a warrior. She's very physically tough, and has been taught her whole life, you know, and trained her whole life to avenge Earth. But when at the completion of her training, their training, she and her twin brother, neither of them get the assignments that they are expected. They're both expecting to be these elite warriors, and the powers that be in their society have different plans for them. So here, along with a captured alien and her brothers, we're gonna go with interesting, because again, don't want to give anything away. Interesting friend. They leave this, Kier and the alien and the friend leave the station, and everything in her world is turned upside down. This is an award-winning space opera. It won the Hugo this year for Best Novel. It's about war and family, and what do you do when all of your choices are bad? You've got choices and you have places you can go with them, but none of the options are good. What do you do then? And again, like Warm Hand of Ghosts, despite the heavy themes, this is a fun read. It was very hard to put down, and like I was reading this book during my lunch break at work, and I came back right after the first really big twist, and no one else at the library had read it yet, and I was just bursting. So it, you know, keeps you very engaged, and you're going to have somebody to talk to about this. And it was the last read. Now I found people to talk about it with. The Sci-Fi Fantasy Book Club here at Saks read this, and everybody really enjoyed it. So if, yeah, you just want an exciting, interesting, different read, I recommend Some Desperate Glory. And then next up, we have Robin for her picks.
Hello, I'm Robin. I work in the training department at SLCL, St. Louis County Library, and the two books that I'm going to talk about today are both kind of about the same topic. They're about what it means to be the hero and what it means to be the villain. They are still very different stories. And the first book I'm going to talk about is How to Become a Dark Lord and How to Become a Dark Lord and Die Trying. This book was a lot of fun just because it was different from what I normally have read. The story starts with a main character named Davi. This person is locked in a dungeon and about to be tortured to death again. They are originally from our world, and she was brought to another distant and more magical world, where she was told that she is the only one who can unite humanity against the great Dark Lord and save the day. So she starts doing that when she's first here or there, and she raises an army again and again and again. But she's defeated each time and finds herself trapped in a sort of Groundhog Day loop. So time and time again, she rallies the armies of humanity to work together, and time again, she has to watch all of her armies and her allies be defeated. So at one point, very early on, probably in the first or second chapter, she decides that she has had enough, and she is ready to stop being the hero and to start being the villain. So she comes up with a plan to find out how to become the perfect Dark Lord and win for once. So I struggled to like the main character Davi a lot in the beginning. I had to keep reminding myself that she was stuck in a Groundhog Day loop and that the people around her didn't really matter because they weren't real to her. And she just had to keep living it over and over again. As the story develops, so does the main character. And though I didn't start off liking her, I think I could begin to like her as a character. The book is the first in a new series, and the next one doesn't come out until May. And it does leave you at a bit of a cliffhanger, but not too bad. One of the things I liked the most about this book is that the plot moved very quickly. There was humor, and it covered some big themes like loyalty, friendship, and leadership, and how that played out when you were leading an army and gathering people who you had always seen as the enemy and who had destroyed the people you cared about in the past. And as the books go on, Davi starts to look at things differently and look at the people she's considered monsters in the past as actual people in a little bit. How that process comes about and where she's left and what happens is a big part of the book. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but it's a great book about personal survival and how there's more to life than just that sometimes. So that's that book. I'm going to move on to the next book called Dreadful. This book is similar in the fact that it's a character who changes from being good or evil to the other, but this story is more of like almost a cozy fantasy. This story starts with a main character waking up after an explosion. This character has absolutely no memory of who he is, where he is, how he came to be locked in what is clearly a wizard's workroom, and probably not a very nice wizard after looking around at the stuff surrounding him. There's also goblins banging on the door trying to get in, and he has no idea what's happening or why. Eventually, he realizes that he is the owner of the wizard's workroom. He is, in fact, a wizard, and the goblins banging on the door are terrified for him, and they also work for him. Besides that, he has a kidnapped princess locked away somewhere in his wizard's tower, and he's part of a team of evil wizards who have a plan to remake slash destroy the world, which turns out to be why they need the princess in the first place. The more he learns about himself and who he was before he woke up, the more it doesn't feel right. He doesn't feel like he's the villain. He doesn't feel like he wants to be the villain. He doesn't want to be Dread Lord Gavrix anymore. He decides he wants to be just regular old Gav. So this book is about what happens next once he's made that decision. He has done terrible things. He is in the middle of a plot to do more terrible things. Can he really just stop being bad? What can he do to make up for all the terrible things that he has done in the past? What is he actually responsible for making up for because he doesn't remember who he was in the past? He wasn't really that evil person, but he was. Is there any way for him to move forward as the man he wants to be and not sink back down into the man that he was? What's the cost of true change? All of these big questions. Um, so many questions, including what to do when you have a surplus of garlic. This book has a lot more of a lighthearted feel than the other one. I enjoyed the style of humor in both, but this one is a little bit more fun and laid back. Both books were different and entertaining, and if you're looking for something with a little bit more moral ambiguity, I'd say go with How to Become a Dark Lord. If you're looking for something that's funny and easy to read, this Dreadful was really funny, really fast, and really easy to read. I've recommended both to a ton of people this year, and I loved them both. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and send it back to the beginning to Sarah S. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Thank you all of the presenters. Such good picks. And I've read a couple of these, and I've added some more to my to be read list. We had a ton of books tonight, but if you would like more to read, you should try out our personalized reading service. This is a form you can fill out on our website and tell us what you like and what you don't like. And within a week, we'll send you a list of 5 titles that we think that you may enjoy. Oh, by the way, the chat is open. If you have any questions for us, be sure to put them in the chat because hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes for questions in just a minute here. I just wanted to let you know that we are in our Winter Reading Challenge right now. Winter Reading Challenge runs from December 1st to January 31st. You will read books and complete activities to earn a raffle entry for some really cool prizes. And in fact, filling out the personalized reading list request is one of the activities that you can do to complete the Winter Reading Challenge. So check it out on our website. We hope that you'll sign up and have some fun with the library and with reading this winter. And before we go, if you liked this program, we hope that you might join another program. In the new year, it's a time to try some new things. So I want to bring your attention to 2 different things. One is joining a book discussion group. Every branch of the library has a book discussion group, at least one. Several of them have several. We also have some online book discussion groups. So if you would like to join a book discussion group, especially one that actually talks about the book, then join a library book group. You can find them by going to our events calendar and then filtering the event type on the left-hand side by book discussions, and you can see all of the upcoming book discussion meetings. Also, we are having the St. Louis Area Volunteer Fair on Monday, January 6th at 1 p.m. at the Clark Family Branch. Over 30 organizations are going to be there to tell you about their volunteer opportunities. So if you've been looking for a way to get involved and give back to your community, come to the volunteer fair and find out a way that you can join one of those organizations. Okay, so with that, that's going to bring us to the end of our presentation. But if any of you have questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if our presenters would like to turn on their cameras, I will be in gallery view so everyone can see us. And yeah, if you have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat. The first question we have in there is about the personalized recommendations. Do we use AI or are they chosen by a librarian? They are chosen by library staff. So in fact, it's Harry and I who do these. So when you tell us what you like and what you don't like, we think really, really hard about it. We look into some databases, we look online, we think about all of the books that we know, and we come up with some things that we think that you will enjoy. So they are chosen by Harry and I. We like doing them. It's a fun part of the job. Do you want to say anything else about it, Harry?
Handcrafted.
That's right. Oh, and we do appreciate your feedback, and we keep a record of the list that we've given you. So we do have a number of users who've done it over and over and over again. So we will give you new recommendations every time, and we'll take your feedback into account. So it's a fun time. It's a fun time. Let's see. Any other questions in the chat before we wrap up? Just in case, I will ask all of you while we wait and see if there might be another question. Did any of you read any of each other's picks? And if so, did you want to say anything about any of them briefly before we go? I will say that I loved Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. It's just a really original book. And I too am not a gamer. So don't be put off by being a gamer. Like if you're not a gamer, it's a great book about creativity and friendship, and like the choices we make in life. So yeah. And then I did recently read The Phoenix Keeper. And although it's fantasy, it's set in a contemporary-ish world. And if you are into zoos, like it gives so much information about what the back end of running a zoo is like. Since we have a great zoo here in St. Louis, I would say read it for that alone. So anyone read any other people's picks you want to say anything about briefly?
I'll just throw in, because Kat wasn't able to speak, I loved The Mammoths at the Gate. And each of those books, while they have characters that repeat, you don't necessarily have to read them all or in order. So you could jump straight into Mammoths at the Gate. You don't necessarily have to read the 3 that come before it.
Yeah, I was glad to see Nevo and T. Kingfisher, because those are 2 writers that I will read pretty much anything that they write. And they're also great if you're not huge on fantasy or like folklore inspired books, because those 2 authors have a lot of books that are quite short, that are almost more novellas than novels, so that you can get like a little quick taste to see if you might want to read more.
I love T. Kingfisher too. So just another another member of her fan club. She's amazing.
I was also going to say I love T.K. Fisher, so definitely a great book. Also Martha Wells, anything from Martha Wells, I love. I love the Murderbot series, Murderbot Diaries. I definitely would have talked about that if I didn't see Martha Wells already on it. But T.K. Fisher is great too, because some of them are really fantasy, some of them are horror. You can get all different kinds of books. So I love a lot of things. Thank you.
Yeah, just oh, actually, Harry, someone has asked in the chat about the personalized reading list link. Would you mind grabbing a link and putting that into the chat?
Will do.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little tidbit of interesting trivia about T. Kingfisher. She also writes the Hamster Princess series for children, which I thought was funny. Anyway, because they're very different. Like if you read her adult Kingfisher book, it's like there are funny, but there's, I don't know, they're just a little bit darker and more complex. Anyway. Wonderful.
Sarah, I actually read The Ministry of Time this year and didn't like it. So I was very interested to hear your perspective, and I'm gonna put it back on my TBR list and try and reread it and see if I like it again the second time.
Yeah. See, there's no accounting for taste. That's why I like this particular program, because I like having so many different perspectives. Okay, Harry has put the link for the personalized reading list in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions? I see lots of comments like thank yous and that sort of thing. So, but I think unless there's another question, I think we will go ahead and wrap up there. So I want to say thank you to all of the attendees for attending with us. It's, like I said, such a fun program and a great way to wrap up the year. We've made it through 2024. We hope all of you will join us at some programs coming up in 2025. And I want to say a thank you again to all of the presenters that you're taking your time, out of your daily duties from all your different branches and departments to present with us. We really appreciate it. So with that, I think we will go ahead and end there. Like I said, we've recorded the presentation and we will upload it to YouTube. And when that link is ready, usually within a couple of days, I will send out a follow-up email that will have a link to that, as well as to with the handout and links to the programs we just talked about. And yeah, so all of our presenters will log off now. Since we did put that link in the chat, I'm going to leave the program running for just a minute or two with my camera off. But thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.